February 1947. Deep in the frozen heart of Siberia, inside a laboratory that doesn't exist on any map, a group of men in white coats stand around a simple wooden box. The box is plain, unmarked. It looks like it could hold tools or maybe spare parts. But the men are not mechanics. They are some of the Soviet Union's brightest physicists, and they are staring at this box like it holds the most dangerous secret in the world. Because it does. Inside this box is the core of the Soviet Union's first nuclear reactor, the very heart of their atomic bomb project. It contains small, silvery pellets of uranium, and here is the first strange rule about this weapon. The soldiers and engineers guarding this place, the men who built this reactor with their own hands, are forbidden from looking inside. They are told it is just special equipment, classified. Their commanders have given a direct order: do not ask questions, do not be curious, just do your job. This is the story of a weapon so secret it was kept secret from the very people who were supposed to use it. A weapon whose greatest danger wasn't to the enemy, but to the soldiers who stood next to it. Why? What was in that box that was so terrifying? And what happened when the orders to not look were finally broken? To understand, we have to go back. The year is 1945. World War II has just ended. America has a terrifying new weapon, the atomic bomb. They used it on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world saw the destruction. In Moscow, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin is furious and terrified. He knows that without his own bomb, the Soviet Union is defenseless. America could dominate the world. So he makes a desperate, urgent command to his scientists. Build us a bomb, at any cost. I don't care how you do it, just do it. Fast. The project gets a code name. It is called First Lightning. The scientist in charge is a man named Igor Kurchatov. He is brilliant, and he is under unimaginable pressure. Stalin wants results in years, not decades. So Kurchatov and his team begin cutting corners. They take risks, big risks. Their first major step is to build a nuclear reactor. This is a giant machine that cooks special material to create the fuel for a bomb. It's like a giant, ultra-dangerous oven. And for this oven to work, it needs a core. That core is made of uranium, and that uranium is what's in the box. You see, uranium is radioactive. It gives off invisible energy called radiation. In small, controlled amounts, it's useful, but in the amounts needed for a bomb, it is deadly. This radiation can pass right through your skin. It attacks the cells inside your body. It can make you sick, cause cancer, or even kill you in hours if you are too close. The American scientists knew this. They handled their uranium with remote control machines, behind thick walls of lead and concrete. They wore protective suits. They had strict safety rules. But Kurchatov's team in 1947 Siberia, they don't have time for that. They don't have the same technology. And most importantly, they have Stalin's voice in their ears. Faster, faster. So they make a choice, a terrifying choice. They decide that the speed of the project is more important than the safety of the men. They will build the reactor quickly, and they will keep the true danger of the uranium a secret. The uranium arrives in those plain wooden boxes. The soldiers unloading the trains have no idea what they are carrying. The engineers fitting the pieces together are told it is just radio-technical equipment. The scientists know the truth. They handle the uranium with long tools, behind thin shields. But the guards standing watch just meters away, the drivers, the cooks in the camp, they are left in the dark. They are living and working next to one of the most dangerous materials on Earth, and no one has told them. The weapon is being built right beside them, and they are not allowed to see it, because the Soviet leadership feared one thing more than radiation. They feared panic. They feared that if a simple soldier knew what was in that box, he might refuse to work. He might run. And the entire bomb project, Stalin's pride, would fall apart. So the order was silence. The uranium sat in its box. The reactor was built around it. And the stage was set for a disaster that no one could see coming, because they were ordered not to look. The reactor needed a home. But you couldn't build the heart of a nuclear bomb just anywhere. It needed to be hidden, far from spies, far from cities, and far from questions. So the Soviets built a ghost town. In a remote forest hundreds of miles from any major city, they began construction of a secret scientific complex. It was given a bland, boring name, Chelyabinsk 40. You would not find it on any public map. If you were sending a letter, you could not use this address. To the outside world, and to most people in the Soviet Union, this place simply did not exist. But inside its barbed wire fences, it was a bustling city. Thousands of people lived here: scientists, engineers, soldiers, and their families. They had apartments, schools, shops, and even a movie theatre. It looked almost normal. Almost. But every single person here was living a lie. Their official documents said they worked at a chemical plant or a radioisotope facility. Parents told their children they were helping to build the motherland's future. In a way, they were. But they didn't know the true cost. The most important building in this secret city was known simply as Assembly Plant 817. This was where our wooden box was headed. This was where the uranium core would be placed inside the massive graphite and concrete reactor named A1. The plan was to turn uranium into plutonium, the real fuel for the bomb. The work was hard, manual, and round the clock. Soldiers and young communist volunteers called komsomols did much of the heavy lifting. They were proud. They believed they were part of something heroic, building a shield to protect the USSR from America. What they were actually doing, often with their bare hands and simple tools, was handling nuclear destiny. The graphite blocks for the reactor were dusty. That black dust got everywhere, on their clothes, in their hair, on their skin. They breathed it in. No one told them that graphite used in a nuclear reactor could become radioactive. No one handed out protective masks. The uranium itself? The rules were bizarre and secretive. When the special trains carrying the wooden boxes arrived at the dead of night, only a handful of senior scientists were allowed to be present. The soldiers who unloaded the boxes were quickly ushered away. Imagine being one of those soldiers. You are told the contents of the box are a state secret of the highest level. You are told that your patriotism and loyalty are being tested. Looking inside is an act of treason. So you carry the heavy, mysterious box, feeling its weight, wondering, but you never dare to peek. Your curiosity is replaced by fear, not fear of radiation, but fear of the KGB officer watching you from the shadows. The scientists who knew the truth were trapped in a terrible dilemma. They understood the radiation risk. Some tried to make small safety rules. They might tell a worker, "Don't stand in that spot for more than a few minutes." But they could never explain why. They couldn't say, "Because invisible particles are tearing apart your cells." If a worker asked, "Is this safe?" the answer was always the same. "The party has assured us it is safe. Your work is glorious. Do not question." The real weapon here wasn't just the uranium, it was information. Or, more precisely, the lack of it. By controlling what people knew, the state controlled what they feared. They replaced the fear of invisible radiation with a very visible, powerful fear. The fear of punishment, of being called a traitor, of disappearing. So the work continued at a frantic pace. The A1 reactor took shape, a monstrous maze of graphite and metal channels. And at its centre, soon to be inserted, was the contents of that unassuming box, the uranium core. But the scientists cutting corners had created a fatal flaw. In their rush, the design of the reactor's cooling system was simple. Too simple. It relied on a system of water pipes flowing through the radioactive core to keep it from overheating. It was a bomb-making oven, and they were trying to cool it with a garden hose. They were breaking every safety rule in a rulebook that didn't yet exist. And the thousands of people living in the city that didn't exist, going to work every day, were standing right next to it. The stage wasn't just set, the powder keg was built. And in the summer of 1948, someone was about to strike a match. That match would come not from a spy or an accident, but from a routine decision made by a manager under pressure to finally turn the machine on. The order was about to be given. Start the reactor. Initiate the chain reaction. And the soldiers on duty that day, the ones forbidden from looking at the weapon, would be the first ones in its path. June 7th, 1948. The A1 reactor is complete. It is time for its final test. The head scientist, Igor Kurchatov, gives the order. The control rods, which have been holding back the atomic chain reaction, are slowly, carefully withdrawn. Deep inside the reactor, in the uranium from our wooden box, a silent storm begins. Atoms split, releasing energy and more radiation. The graphite blocks glow with heat. It is working. For the first time in the Soviet Union, a sustained nuclear chain reaction is underway. The plutonium for the bomb is being created. There is relief in the control room. They have done it. They have caught up to the Americans. But there is a problem, a big one. The cooling system, the simple, rushed, garden hose of a system, is failing. The water pipes running through the white-hot core are beginning to clog. The uranium and graphite are breaking down, creating sludge. The water isn't flowing fast enough. The temperature is rising. Think of a car engine with no oil. It starts to smoke, then seize up, then melt from the inside. That's what is happening to the core of reactor A1. The engineers in charge face a nightmare choice. If they shut down the reactor completely, they will ruin the core. It will solidify into a radioactive, unusable rock. Stalin's bomb project will be delayed for months, maybe years. The consequences from the Kremlin will be severe. So, they choose the other option. They decide to try and clean the reactor while it's still running. It's a desperate, unthinkable gamble. Their plan? They call it the bath. They will pump a special cleaning solution through the pipes to dissolve the sludge. But to do this, they have to bypass several safety valves. They have to jury-rig the system. And most crucially, they have to send men into areas of the plant that are now becoming dangerously radioactive. Who do they send? Not the scientists who understand the risk. They send the soldiers, the guards, the maintenance workers, the men who have been kept in the dark. These men are given a simple, urgent task. Go check the pipes. Go tighten this valve. Go see if the cleaning fluid is flowing. They are told it is a technical problem, a plumbing issue. They are given no special clothing, no masks, no meters to measure the invisible poison in the air. For days, teams of these men take turns going into the hot zones. They are patriots, following orders. They work in shifts, leaning over pipes, their hands touching metal that is humming with radioactivity. Dust, radioactive dust, is in the air. It settles on their sweaty skin. They breathe it in. When they come out, some of them feel it almost immediately. A strange metallic taste in their mouths. A deep, unnatural fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. Some begin to feel nauseous. They report to their medical clinic. The doctors, who are also not told the full truth, diagnose them with industrial fatigue or mild poisoning from chemical fumes. They are given rest and aspirin, and then they are often sent back in. The reactor, meanwhile, is getting sicker. The bath isn't working. The clogged pipes are now completely blocked in places. The temperature soars. On June 19, 1948, the crisis peaks. A section of the uranium graphite core overheats catastrophically. It doesn't explode like a bomb, but it melts. A part of the very first Soviet nuclear reactor fuses into a radioactive lava. The radiation levels inside the building skyrocket to thousands of times what is safe for a human. Alarms the scientists didn't even know they needed are going off in their minds. They finally, desperately, order a full shutdown. But the damage is done. Not just to the reactor. The men who went into the bath are now leaving work, walking back to their apartments in Chelyabinsk 40. They hug their children. They eat dinner with their wives. They are exhausted heroes, they think. But they are carrying the weapon home with them. It is on their clothes, in their hair, in their very lungs. The invisible radiation they were never warned about is now inside them, ticking away. The first to fall ill is a young soldier named Anatoly. His skin, where it touched contaminated equipment, starts to turn red, then a deep, painful purple. His blood cells are being destroyed from the inside. He is rushed to a hospital in Moscow, so secret it has no name. He is patient 0. And as the doctors examine him, a horrifying realization dawns on the few scientists in the know. They have just conducted a terrible experiment. They have exposed hundreds of their own men to massive doses of radiation, and they have no idea how to save them. The weapon designed in secret, built in secret, and operated in secret had claimed its first victims. And now the state faced its second, even more impossible command. How do you hide a disaster that is living, breathing, and dying inside your own people? Anatoly, the young soldier, did not die quickly. His body became a battlefield for a war it could not see. In a classified Moscow hospital, known only as Clinic Number 6, doctors watched in helpless horror as the symptoms unfolded. It was a medical blueprint of radiation sickness, a disease so new it didn't have a proper name. First, the burns on his skin deepened. Then his hair began to fall out in clumps. He was racked with violent nausea and pain. Finally, his immune system vanished. His body could not fight off the most ordinary germs. A simple cold became life-threatening. Anatoly was not alone. One by one, other workers from Chelyabinsk 40 began to arrive at the clinic. A mechanic named Vladimir, an engineer named Pyotr, dozens of them, all men in the prime of their lives, all now fading under the same mysterious illness. The doctors were the best in the Soviet Union, but they were working blindfolded. The scientists from the bomb project were finally forced to tell a sliver of the truth. The men had been exposed to penetrating radiation. But how much? For how long? What was the treatment? No one had clear answers. There was no manual for this. And here, the second, even darker layer of secrecy descended. The mission was no longer just to build a bomb. It was to contain the truth. The patients were placed in a sealed wing. Their medical files were stamped with a special classification higher than top secret. They were listed under code names, not their real ones. Even within the hospital, most staff were not told what they were really treating. When a wife asked, "What is wrong with my husband?" the answer was always vague. A rare blood disease, a severe industrial accident. The words uranium, reactor, or radiation were never spoken. When a patient like Anatoly finally died, his body utterly destroyed from the inside, the cause of death on the official certificate would say something like septicemia or heart failure. It was never the truth. Their funerals were quiet, private affairs. No military honours that might draw questions. Just a swift burial, and a family left with a mystery and a broken heart. Back in Chelyabinsk 40, life in the city that didn't exist had to appear normal. The party threw a celebration. They handed out medals to the scientists and managers for successfully starting the reactor. The official story was one of triumph, of Soviet ingenuity defeating American imperialism. But a whisper network began among the workers. They called it the special disease. You got it from working in certain sections of the plant. You'd feel the strange fatigue, the metallic taste. People started to notice patterns. They weren't stupid, but to speak the suspicion aloud was dangerous. A question could be seen as doubt. Doubt was treason. The KGB's role shifted from just guarding secrets to actively manufacturing a new reality. They spread their own disinformation. The sick workers had been careless with standard chemicals. They had weak constitutions. It was tragic, but isolated. The most chilling decision of all was yet to come. The ruined, melted core of the A1 reactor was still sitting in the middle of Assembly Plant 817. It was a lump of highly radioactive lava spewing poison. It had to be cleaned up. And guess who they ordered to do it? A new batch of soldiers and young Komsomol volunteers. They were told they were performing a heroic, vital cleanup operation after a technical malfunction. They were given basic overalls and cloth masks that did nothing to stop radiation. No one measured the lethal doses they received as they chipped away at the radioactive slag with hand tools. The weapon was broken, but it was still killing. It killed through silence. It killed through orders. It killed through the proud, patriotic desire of a young man to serve his country, a desire the state exploited with cold calculation. By the end of 1948, the first Soviet atomic bomb, built with the plutonium from other soon-to-be-built reactors, was almost ready. Stalin would have his shield. But the foundation of that shield was not just graphite and uranium. It was suffering, covered up by lies. It was a mountain of secrets, and on its slopes stood hundreds of men, soldiers and workers who saw the weapon they were never supposed to see, and paid for that sight with their health, their futures, and often their lives. The story should end here, with the bomb tested and the secret buried. But secrets, especially radioactive ones, have a way of leaking out. The world was about to get a terrifying, undeniable hint of what happened in the city that didn't exist. And it would come from a completely unexpected direction. The sky. 5 years later, September 1953. High in the mountains of Japan, a scientific station is collecting dust from the air. This is routine. They are studying global weather patterns. But on this day, the filters collect something strange. A dust that makes their Geiger counters, their radiation detectors, scream in alarm. The needles jump off the charts. This is not normal background radiation. This is fresh, intense, and dangerous. The scientists are confused, then terrified. They check and recheck. The evidence is undeniable. A massive, invisible cloud of radioactivity is passing over Japan. It is drifting east from the direction of the Soviet Union. The world's intelligence agencies, including the American CIA, piece together the data from their own spy planes and stations. They trace the cloud's path back to its source. The trail leads directly to a blank spot on the map, the southern Urals, near a place called Kishtim. The Americans are stunned. They have their own secret nuclear sites. They know the signature of a nuclear accident. This was not a bomb test. A bomb's radiation disperses quickly and in a specific pattern. This was different. This was a slow, sickly leak of the most dangerous kind of waste. They had discovered, without knowing its full story, the ghost of the 1948 disaster. The Soviet cover-up had been almost perfect, but it could not control the wind. Because the solution to the ruined A1 reactor core and the growing piles of nuclear waste from Chelyabinsk 40 had been as reckless as its creation. They stored this liquid waste in vast, underground metal tanks. The tanks were poorly built, overheating, and forgotten. In the fall of 1953, one of these tanks, stuffed with the radioactive leftovers of the bomb program, the physical remains of the bath and the melted core, exploded. It wasn't a nuclear explosion, but a chemical one, like a giant contaminated pressure cooker blowing its lid. It blasted a volcano of radioactive dust into the sky, creating its own deadly weather system. The Kishtim disaster was the third worst nuclear accident in history, after only Chernobyl and Fukushima. And for decades, the Soviet Union flatly denied it ever happened. When sickened villagers from nearby towns that were supposed to be too far away to exist, asked what the strange cloud was, they were told it was an aurora borealis, or atmospheric dust. Whole villages were secretly, forcibly evacuated years later, their homes bulldozed, their very existence erased. The world now had proof of a catastrophic Soviet nuclear failure, but they still didn't know the human story that came before it. They didn't know about the wooden box, the forbidden soldiers, or the bath. That truth would only trickle out decades later, after the Soviet Union itself collapsed. Old scientists, burdened by guilt, finally spoke. Archives were opened. The code names on the medical files were matched to real people. The final, awful truth was this. The weapon was never shown to the soldiers, because the soldiers were the experiment. In the frantic race for the bomb, those men were more than just labourers. They were unwilling test subjects. The state needed to know what radiation did to humans, how much exposure it took to make a man sick, how long he could work before collapsing, what the symptoms looked like. That data was invaluable for planning future accidents, for handling bombs, for understanding the true cost of nuclear war. By not telling them, they got pure, unfiltered results. No panic, no protective gear to spoil the data, just a human being's body meeting a silent weapon, and the state taking notes. So, why was this Soviet weapon never shown to the soldiers? It wasn't just to prevent panic. It wasn't just to keep the project fast. It was because the weapon's first and most secret target was their own people. The greatest tragedy wasn't the accident. It was the deliberate, calculated decision to sacrifice thousands of lives in the dark, all for the sake of a weapon they hoped would never be used. Stories like this one get buried under the weight of history and of secrets. They remind us that the real cost of a weapon isn't just in its building, but in its keeping, in the choices made in shadowed rooms that echo for generations. If you want to join us as we uncover more of these hidden chapters of history, the real stories behind the secrets, then consider subscribing to the channel. It costs nothing, and it helps us keep digging into the past to bring these crucial stories to light. Thanks for watching.